Chapter 21 The Medes and the Persians, a New Empire. Let's take a minute to review the story of the Assyrians. Earlier we read about the Assyrian king Shamshi-Adad. He wanted to rule the world. He conquered the cities all around him and made them obey him. He put his soldiers in the conquered cities and told them to punish anyone who disobeyed his laws. Soon the Assyrians ruled the whole northern part of Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. But the Babylonian kingdom ruled the southern part of Mesopotamia, and they were even stronger than the Assyrians. The Babylonian king Hammurabi marched his army up and took over Assyria. For a little while the Assyrians had to obey the Babylonians. But the Assyrians didn't like belonging to the Babylonian Empire. Eventually they rebelled and took their kingdom back. Now the Assyrians were in charge, and the Babylonians had to obey them. The Assyrians went back to conquering all the cities around them. They fought their way all the way over to Canaan. They captured the Jews who lived there and made them leave their homes. But the Babylonians made friends with another nation, Media. Together the Babylonians and the Medes got together and destroyed Assyria. Now Babylon and Media were in charge, and the Assyrians had to obey. This must have been a very strange time to live. The rulers of the world kept changing. First they were Assyrian, then Babylonian, then Assyrian, then Babylonian again. The Babylonians and the Medes must have been pleased with themselves. They had finally gotten rid of Assyria. Now they were the most powerful nations in Mesopotamia. But the Medes and the Babylonians weren't in charge for very long. A new nation was becoming stronger and stronger. This new nation was called Persia. At first, the Persians were just a tribe of shepherds. They lived at the edge of Media and obeyed the king of the Medes. The Persian shepherds were ruled by a man named Astyages. He wasn't a good man. He liked ruling the Persians, and he would do anything to keep his crown. One night, Astyages had a dream that scared him. He dreamed that his baby grandson would grow up, take his power away, and become the ruler of the Persians. When he woke up, he was frightened. If I don't do something about this, he thought, my grandson will throw me off my throne and become king in my place. Astyages sat up all night, thinking about his dream. In the morning, he called his chief advisor, a man named Harpagus. I have a job for you, he said. I will do anything you tell me to, O king, said Harpagus. Good, Astyages said. Take my grandson out to the mountains and kill him, and don't let anyone know what you're doing. Now go. Harpagus didn't want to do this terrible thing, but he was afraid to disobey the king. So he took the baby and walked out to the mountains. I have to obey the king, he thought to himself. I have to kill the baby, but I can't make myself do it. He looked around and saw a shepherd grazing his sheep nearby. He called the shepherd over. Here, he said, the king wants you to get rid of this baby. You do it. If you do, I'll reward you with much wealth, but if you don't, I'll send the king's soldiers to punish you. The shepherd looked at the baby and had an idea. All right, he said to Harpagus, I'll get rid of the baby. He took the baby and ran home to his wife, who had no children of her own. Wife, he said, the gods have sent us a son. We can raise him as our own. His wife took the baby with tears of joy, and then the shepherd killed a goat, wiped his hands in the blood, and ran back to Harpagus and said, Look, I've done as you told me. So Harpagus went back to Astyages and told him that the baby was dead. But the shepherd and his wife named the baby Cyrus and brought him up there on the mountainside. Cyrus grew up to be tall and strong. He was faster and smarter than any other shepherd's son, and he stood head and shoulders above every other boy his age. One day the shepherd took him down from the mountainside into town to help with the selling of the sheep. While they were at the marketplace, Astyages, the ruler of the Persians, came along with Harpagus. As soon as Astyages saw the young boy selling sheep, he knew that this was his grandson. That evening he sent for Harpagus. You disobeyed me, he said to Harpagus, and Harpagus admitted that he had given the baby to a shepherd rather than killing him. Astyages was so furious that he tried to kill Harpagus and his whole family, but Harpagus fled to the mountains and found Cyrus. If you want to take the king's power away and become king of the Persians yourself, he told Cyrus, I will help you. Together, Harpagus and Cyrus convinced the Persians to follow Cyrus rather than Astyages. Cyrus took power away from his grandfather and became the ruler of the Persians, just as Astyages had dreamed so many years ago. And then he led the Persians into a war. against the great empire of Media. After 3 years of fierce fighting, Cyrus conquered the king of Media as well. Now Cyrus, who had been raised by a shepherd on a mountain, ruled over the combined empires of the Medes and the Persians. Cyrus the Great. Cyrus was now the king of the Medes and the Persians. He was a great warrior, but he also was known as a good and fair king. Even though he had conquered the Medes, he let the Median people stay in their own homes. He even let Median noblemen have some of the power in his new combined empire. After all, his empire was so big that he needed help. He couldn't collect all the taxes, judge all the court cases, and settle all the problems himself, so he made both Persians and Medians officials in his kingdom. The Medians felt that they were being treated well, and so they didn't try to rebel against Cyrus's rule. Now Cyrus decided to make his empire even bigger. He wanted to conquer Asia Minor. Asia Minor was ruled by King Croesus, who was the richest king in the world. He had more gold than anyone else. Cyrus knew that if he could conquer Croesus, he would be rich as well. So he marched his army up to the kingdom of Croesus and conquered it. He captured Croesus and made him stand up on the walls of his city and watch as Persian soldiers looted it. The soldiers went all through the city, carrying away armloads of treasure, gold coins, and jewelry, but Croesus just watched calmly. Finally, Cyrus said, "How can you be so calm? They are robbing you all of your gold." "No, they aren't," Croesus said. "The city belongs to you now, so they are actually stealing from you." When Cyrus heard this, he stopped the soldiers at once and took all the gold back. Next, Cyrus turned his army to the east. Cyrus marched the Persian army all the way over to the Indus River. Now he ruled all the land between Asia Minor and India. The Persian Empire was as wide as it was tall. Cyrus wasn't done conquering yet. There was one big enemy left for him, Babylon. Remember, the Babylonians had been ruling in Mesopotamia for a long time. They were an old kingdom and a very powerful kingdom. Cyrus wanted all that good, fertile land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, but he knew that the Babylonian army was very strong. However, Cyrus had one big advantage over Babylon. The Persians liked Cyrus because he was a good, fair king. But the Babylonians hated their king. He had left the city of Babylon and had gone away to live in a distant desert. In his place, he had given his son, Belshazzar, control over the city. Belshazzar spent too much money on feasting and drinking and not enough on the people of Babylon. So when Cyrus marched his army to Babylon, he didn't meet much resistance. The Babylonians were sick and tired of their own king, so they didn't fight very hard when Cyrus's army arrived at the walls. Some of the Babylonians even opened the gates from the inside and let him in. Babylon fell to the Persians in 539 BC. When Cyrus took over Babylon, he also took over Canaan. Canaan, also called Palestine, had been the home of the Jewish people until Babylon and Assyria conquered it. The Babylonians and Assyrians had made the Jewish people leave their homes, but Cyrus was a merciful king. When he became the king of Babylon, he let the Jews go back to Palestine, and he let them go back to worshiping their own God. This made him even more popular. The Jews were so grateful to Cyrus that they called him the Anointed of the Lord. Now Cyrus was the greatest king in the world, but there was still one country that didn't obey Cyrus, Greece, and soon the Greeks and the Persians would meet in battle. Chapter 22, Sparta and Athens. Life in Sparta. The Persian Empire was a huge country ruled by just one man, Cyrus the Great. Cyrus made the laws for Persia to follow. He decided when the army would attack another country, he decided how much tax the people would pay. He was a good king, but he expected to be in charge and to have people obey him. Greece across the Aegean Sea was a completely different kind of country. The Greeks all spoke the same language, dressed the same way, and worshipped the same gods. They all came to Olympic Games and feasted together. But the Greeks didn't all obey a single king. Instead, each Greek city made its own laws. Each Greek city had its own army, and each Greek city had its own way of living. The Greeks were horrified by the thought of obeying one single powerful ruler. They liked their independence. Athens and Sparta were the two largest Greek cities, but the people of these two cities lived in very different ways. Sparta was ruled by warrior kings, and all Spartan men were required to be soldiers. Boys went to school, but they didn't learn philosophy, art, and music. Instead, when they were 7, they were sent away to special camps where they learned to be obedient, disciplined fighters. They were taught to exercise so that their bodies would be strong. They were made to march long distances without socks or shoes so that their feet would be tough. They weren't given much to eat, and they were never allowed to complain. Spartan boys were expected to be tough and silent. One story from Spartan times tells of a boy who was away at military camp, learning how to be a soldier. He was so hungry that he stole a live fox from someone else at the camp. He was planning on cooking and eating the fox, but just as he was getting ready to kill the fox, he saw some Spartan soldiers walking over to him. He knew that they would beat him for stealing the fox, so he quickly hid the fox underneath his shirt. The fox immediately started biting him, but rather than admit that he had stolen the fox, the boy stood up and talked to the soldiers without showing any pain, even though the fox was chewing on his stomach. He suffered without showing it until the soldiers went away. All Spartan boys were supposed to be this brave and silent. When they were 20, boys had to pass a special test of fitness and to bravery. If they passed, they were allowed to join the army. They would stay in the army until they were old men. Even if they got married, they weren't allowed to live with their families. Instead, they lived with the other soldiers in barracks. Boys who didn't pass this test weren't allowed to vote. They could never be full citizens of Sparta. But what about the girls? Girls were taught to exercise and be strong too, so that they could be the mothers of more boys who would fight for Sparta. In the ancient world of the Spartans, only fighters were truly important, and the Spartans thought that women were weaker and more timid than men. So the women of Sparta were less important than the men. Spartan mothers were supposed to praise their sons for being warlike behavior and reward them for bravery. One Spartan mother told her son, who was leaving for battle, "Come back with your shield or on it." Since the losers of battles were forced to give up their shields, here's what she was really saying: either win the battle or come back dead. Spartans would rather die than lose a fight. Sparta wasn't known for its art or storytelling, but the Spartan army was known and feared all over the world for its bravery and toughness. Today, we still call someone Spartan if they suffer pain or disappointment without complaining. Life in Athens. Spartans were expected to obey their king, but the Greeks who lived in Athens had a different way of doing things. Everyone who lived in Athens had a say in how the city was run, because Athens was a democracy. That means that whenever a new law was written, the people of Athens could vote on whether or not it should actually be followed. Each citizen would have the chance to say, yes, this is a good law, or no, this is not a good law. If more people voted yes than no, the law would pass. They also voted on their leaders, on how much tax they should pay, and whether they should go to war. Whenever it was time for the citizens to vote about something, they would gather in the middle of the city at a special meeting called a forum. There, they would argue about whether to vote yes or no. After the arguments, they would make up their minds and then vote. So that they could understand how to vote properly, the citizens had to be educated. They needed to know why taxes were important and whether leaders were good or bad. They had to understand the laws of the city. If they were ignorant, they wouldn't be able to argue properly about the government of the city, and they wouldn't be able to make up their minds about how to vote. So education in Athens looked very different from education in Sparta. Spartans were expected to obey their king and to fight for him. So they were taught how to be brave, strong, and obedient. But Athenians had to learn about taxes, laws, and government. Athenian boys went to school just like Spartan boys, but they didn't learn how to fight. Instead, they were taught how to read and how to write on wax tablets. They learned mathematics so they could count and add and subtract. They memorized the poetry of Homer. They learned how to play the flute and the lyre, an ancient Greek instrument that looked like a harp. Like the Spartans, the Athenians were expected to be strong, but they exercised by wrestling and by racing each other on foot. Athenian girls were also different from Spartan girls. Athenian girls were taught to be housewives. Some girls learned how to read and write, but all girls learned from their mothers how to be domestic, how to manage a home, sew, raise a garden, take care of children, and manage slaves. Athenian women weren't allowed to vote, but they were expected to keep their homes running smoothly while their husbands were away arguing in the forum and voting about laws and leaders. One of the most famous men in Athens was named Plato. Plato told the Athenians that a democracy had to have educated people in it. If they are ignorant, he said, people who know more than they do will become tyrants and tell them what to do. Was Plato right? Well, let's think about this. Imagine that you've never been taught anything about stealing or ownership. You don't know that people have a right to own things and to keep them, and no one has ever told you what stealing is. You're completely ignorant. Now imagine that you're on your way to the store with $5 to buy a Lego set. Along comes your neighbor. She's bigger and older than you are, and she decides that she'd really like to have that $5. Hey, she says, don't you know that it's Wednesday? Why is that important, you say? Well, she says, on Wednesday, all smaller children are supposed to give their money away to larger children. It's the law. If you don't give me your money, you'll be breaking the law and you'll go to jail. You want to do the right thing, and no one ever taught you that there is no such law, so you hand over your money and your neighbor walks off with it. That's just what Plato meant when he said that ignorant people will always obey tyrants. If you don't know what the law is, anyone can tell you what to do. The Athenians didn't want tyrants to be in charge, so they were careful to educate themselves and their children. The Spartans wanted to be strong and victorious, but the Athenians wanted to be wise and educated. These two Greek cities were very different.